So it was a January morning. I was in my office in New York, and one of our key people in our company, Jean-Louis Van Doren, came into my office and he sat down, and he had this look in his face. You know the look, it's a serious look. And he said, "Joe, we've got a real problem." And I said, "Jean-Louis, what's the problem?" He said, "Last night I was on a conference call with all of our Chinese teams, and the government is going to begin locking down cities across the country. All of our offices are going to be shut down for at least a month, and it could be many months." So I'm hearing this, I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart just sank. And he said, "I've already started a task force to help them." And in that moment, Jean-Louis and I really started to talk about what are the things that we needed to do to help our Chinese teams get up to speed regarding our live online capabilities. We had in North America for about 10 years an online Dale Carnegie program, but it really hadn't been outside of North America. And so in that moment, we made a decision that we had to support our Chinese teams. And within a very short period of time, we started to receive word from all over the world, first with Singapore and Japan and Vietnam, and then in France and Italy, and ultimately North America. The virus was shutting down all of our in-person operations. And keep in mind that at this point, 98% of our Dale Carnegie business around the world, 200 operations, 86 countries, 32 languages, 98% of that was in-person, face-to-face. We started Operation Move the Room, and the objective was to deliver an exceptional experience online, just as it would be in the classroom. And within 4 months, we had trained and certified nearly 1,000 trainers around the world to deliver up to 70 programs online. And these weren't just webinars. These were interactive and breakouts and whiteboards and chat, very interactive. And I'm so proud of what we've seen around the world. Our teams have completely embraced this and transitioned so that today, about 70% of our revenue around the world is now online. And our clients are telling us that these are powerful, transformational experiences. And part of what this COVID-19 has done is it's accelerated our company's digital transformation by years. There is a saying that unprecedented crisis creates unprecedented opportunity. The question is, do we see it? Do we embrace it? How do we succeed in this new reality? How do we connect with our customers, prospective customers, our teams in a virtual world? We're going to talk about that today, and we're also going to talk about where we need to start with resilience, with courage, with confidence for those parts of us that we need to really be strong so that we can take the best of who we are to the people with whom we're interacting online. Now, one of the things I've noticed over the past month is that even though things have changed, people keep saying, "I can't wait until we get back to face-to-face." And at one level, I understand that too. I can't wait for the hugs and the in-person and the handshakes. I'm looking forward to that too. And at the same time, it's important that we recognize that some things are not going to go back to the way that they were, and frankly, they shouldn't. What we've seen is a paradigm shift in how we work, how, when, where we work, how we interact with people. We can work almost anywhere, and we're seeing the things that we did before, things that required travel, business travel, face-to-face interaction, they don't necessarily need that. In June, we were supposed to have a meeting of Dale Carnegie teams from all over the world in Barcelona, Spain. And I remember being on that in an online environment, thinking to myself, my gosh, I would have spent a week, travel there, time change, everything else, all the costs. And frankly, it was a very effective meeting. Our company board held board meetings in April and July that would have required travel across the United States. These were held via Zoom, and they were very, very effective. And the same thing is true with other online meetings that we're involved in, sales meetings, customer interactions. We can accomplish an incredible amount remotely. Now, the reality also is that buyers and sellers are telling us that they prefer so much of this digital reality. Brand new McKinsey survey just from October said that 70 to 80% of B2B decision makers would prefer remote human interactions over the ones that might have been in person. And moreover, almost 90% of those companies surveyed said that they expect the online reality to continue really beyond 12 months. So what we're talking about is a virtual reality that is here to stay. And really the question is, how do we embrace this? How do we get to this level where we are seeing opportunities to thrive, not just to survive? One of the biggest challenges I see, and frankly, one of the biggest lost opportunities, are people who cannot accept that we live in a different world now. And I think about my own Dale Carnegie business. I was sitting at my computer on Saturday morning working on this talk, and an email came across from one of our business leaders from Texas who runs operations in Austin and Houston and San Antonio. And this email said, we had a record month in October. We've already beaten the best start we've had to our fiscal year, and we're on track for a phenomenal quarter. And that went on to say, I think all of this really starts with mindset. Mindset around what we were going to do. Our team basically said, we don't want to go through this crisis. We want to grow through this crisis. And I contrast that view with other people who've said, as soon as we can get together face to face, it'll go back to the way it was. What's the difference between those two views? And what is the difference about the results that those two different people would achieve or not achieve? As we talk about adapting to a virtual reality and really being effective, I'm talking about a competitive advantage where we are really, really good at interacting with people in a virtual world, whether they're team members, whether it's customers, whether it's prospective customers. The start of this has to be in our mindset. And, part of what Dale Carnegie believes is that there are really two different things that lead to performance change. We talk about emotional change, and we talk about behavior change, and then ultimately performance change. The emotional change really is the what I think. It's my attitude. It's that part of me that says, whether I think I can or I think I can't, I'm right. We can teach all the skills we want. We can learn all the skills that we want. But if we're really not sold on those skills, are we going to achieve a change or a meaningful change or a change that's impactful? And so we want to start then with this, the essence of what we think and our attitude. It's funny, I was reading something from Dale Carnegie recently. Here's this phenomenal thought leader who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People and How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And someone had asked him a question. And the question that they asked was, Mr. Carnegie, what's the biggest lesson you've ever learned in your life? I'm thinking to myself, this is a huge question. I can't wait to see what he said. And what he said is that the most important lesson that he ever learned is the importance of what we think. If I knew what you think, I would know who you are. Our thoughts make us what we are. That's the X factor. That's really what drives it. That's what separates someone who is successful from someone who is not successful. It's the same kind of thing where he would say, you could have two people in the exact same situation. One is excited, one is miserable. What's the difference? The difference is that mindset. As we think about how to succeed and thrive in a virtual world, let's just take a second right now and stop and say, where am I? Where am I mentally, emotionally? Do I have confidence? Am I living in a place of fear and stress? How do I break through that? And that's really the opportunity for us, first and foremost, is to say, how do I break through that? How do I be my best? The concept of resilience really refers to the ability that people have to bounce back. So something bad happens, and how do we respond to that? Are we able to cope? Are we able to thrive? Or does it completely paralyze us? And certainly we've all had times in our lives where something has happened that's just so challenging. We've just really struggled. I think about myself leading a small business right after 9/11 and just being paralyzed by the fear and the challenge. It took a while to work through that, but thankfully I did. And thankfully that business we succeeded. But that resilience is such a critical part of who we are. So if you look at the chart that's on right now, there really are 4 different ways that we're going to look at resilience. One is people who are chronic. They're chronically distressed. So if you look at the top line, the blue line at the top, these are people who are something bad happens and something adverse happens, and they struggle with it the entire time. Over a period of time, they are unable to function effectively. From the left, the second line starts high and then goes down. That's someone who's recovered. So they start in there's a stressor, they're impacted, and then over time they recover. The third line down from the left starts low and then goes high. It gets worse over time. This is a person who thinks that things maybe are not horrible up front, but then all of a sudden over time, things get really worse. That's delayed. But the line at the bottom, that's the line where we all want to be. That line is a person who can face an adverse situation and still thrive through that and be able to function effectively. Those are the people who really are in a position for leadership and to be effective, especially through a time like we're going through right now when we think about this COVID crisis, of which we're in the midst, and we have many months that we're going to be dealing with this. This is not going to go away overnight. And the sooner we acknowledge that, the sooner we can move forward and embrace what we need to do as leaders to succeed and thrive. The data that we have done, so Dale Carnegie has done research around the world, and we did research as recently as February looking at the essence of resilience. And what we realized and what we saw from the data is that people who are positive, people who are confident, are far more likely to be resilient. They're far more likely to be able to draw upon their strength. People who are positive and confident get better results because they expect better results, they work to better results, and they ask, in what ways can we? So there are a number of different things that we can do to become positive and confident. And again, what we're going to talk about is how do we interact really powerfully in a virtual world. And at the same time, we have to start with who we are and where we are. So we need to have that positivity. We need to have that confidence. So just a few tips, and these are Dale Carnegie principles that we teach in our programs and have taught for 108 years. And they're enduring and effective. The first is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. And often we look at this principle in terms of other people. We say, of course, we don't like to be around people who are complainers. What I'm encouraging you to think about is the voice in your own mind that is self-critical. It says, I should have done this, or I can't do that. I can't. I was on a podcast recently, and the woman who was interviewing me said, geez, I was afraid to reach out to you. I thought you might not want to, talk to me and have me. And I said, that didn't even occur to me. I was delighted to get your message asking me to be on your podcast. The point is, it's like we shouldn't have the self-critical language that draws us down. Live in daytight compartments. So Dale Carnegie would say, if you pretend, for example, that you're in a ship and they've got these watertight doors, so that if there's water gets in one, you can't get into the others. And living in a daytight compartment really means, I've got the beginning of this day and the end of this day. I'm not going to worry about all the things that could go wrong over the next week or month or 6 months. Those things may never happen. I need to focus on what is happening today. And if something is happening today that is causing me stress, I'm going to ask, look, what's the worst that can possibly happen here? The very worst that could possibly happen. And then accepting that and working backwards, again, will normally put me in a place where, okay, great. How do I make this better? And the last part of this, fill your mind with thoughts of peace, courage, health, and hope. There's a quote from Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, who said, our lives are what our thoughts make it. Why not remind ourselves of the good things that we have going on, the positives that we have, the times that we have been successful in the past, the difficult times that we've gotten through. Fill our minds with those kinds of things as opposed to the negative, and then we'll be ready really to thrive. So let's talk about how do we build relationships in a virtual world. So how do we build relationships in a virtual world? And for most of us, even now, this is still new. We've lived our entire lives not really thinking about online interaction the way that we have to today. And in some ways, that can help us because we can look back at what has worked in our offline environment, if you will. And the essence of relationship, the foundation of all relationship is trust. So let's talk about trust, and then we'll talk about how to build trust in an online world, just as we have in an offline world. So the first component of trust really goes to competence. As you and I are interacting, part of what we're doing is we're assessing each other. Is this person credible? Does this person seem like there's someone that I can trust? Or is there something about their interaction that I need to be aware of? We'll talk about some virtual cues and things that we can do in terms of how we present ourselves online. The second, of course, is honesty. And honesty really happens partly, it's in the moment, but that credibility occurs over time when someone is consistently reliable. But even in a single presentation, even in a single interaction, am I being honest? Am I being authentic? Am I being reliable? So all of us need to start always from a place of integrity. I guess that probably goes without saying. And at the same time, building that trust requires that honesty. And the third part of this is benevolence. And I like to think about benevolence. I always say to my kids, and I say it to team members too, it's, I've got your back, right? I'm looking out for you. So, and we want, when we're dealing with people in our lives, to know that this person's got my interest. They care about me. One of the things that Theodore Roosevelt, the American president, once said is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And really, that's the essence of this. So that trust requires, it's important, yes, that you're competent, and it's important, yes, that you're honest, and it's also important that we are demonstrating that we're living from an empathetic standpoint and caring about the people that we're interacting with. So trust is critically important. We know that. And what does the data tell us about where trust is today? 37% of customers say they trust their salesperson. This is from Dale Carnegie research from around the world. And at the same time, 71% will buy from someone they trust over a lower price. So isn't that really something how trust is a competitive advantage? When we have we're a trusted advisor, a trusted person, our customers are going to want to be connected to us. Our team members are going to want to be connected to us. They're going to want to work with us. 76% of customers will refer new clients if they trust you. And 81% of customers will buy again if they trust you. So for those of you who are salespeople, and I guess in some sense we're all salespeople, just recognizing the critical importance of that trust. And ultimately, the things we need to do, and this is another thing I always say to my team, I say it to my kids, that trust is a very difficult thing to gain. It's a very easy thing to lose. We have to really cherish this. It's who we are. It's how we present ourselves, and it's our integrity. Now, unfortunately, as I mentioned with one of the earlier stats, trust is in trouble. 64% of U.S. American adults believe that confidence in each other is shrinking. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of reasons why leadership around the world, why people are losing faith in leadership, business leaders, political leaders, and really it ultimately comes down to violations of trust, violations of confidence, people who are self-serving and so forth. So we've got the recipe. We know how to build trusting and successful relationships. The question then is, in what ways can we do that? In what ways can we build trust in face-to-face communications? And let's also start by recognizing what do we lose being online versus being in person? And part of being in person, we've got a whole range of cues that we just don't have when we're online, whether they're nonverbal cues, body language, kind of tone, or things that we can pick up on, a full body view of someone and so forth. And how, of course, we think about the power of human connection. What's the first thing that we would do pre-COVID? When you meet someone, we shake their hand, right? We embrace that person. And for centuries, the handshake has been kind of a sign of trust. We evaluate people based on trust. So what's different about virtual relationships than in-person relationships? And there's really four things. One is less connection, of course, right? We're not right in front of someone. There's a physical distance. In many ways, there might be an emotional distance, but that connection is different. So we have to think about how do we build trust working around that lack of connection. Less feedback. Again, my feedback is limited to the screen that's in front of me and what I can see. It's not limited. It doesn't include all the other things beyond that. So another challenge is really less commitment. There's less commitment in a online relationship, if you will, than an in-person one. I just think about myself in the morning. If I'm sitting down in front of my computer with a cup of tea, I've got less invested in that than I would if I'm driving someplace, traveling someplace, having someone come into my office. So we often have less commitment in these kinds of meetings, but also more risk that we can be misunderstood, we can miscommunicate. So we've really got to be careful and aware of the difference about being online versus being in person. I think about risk also from the leader's perspective. So this is someone who might be trying to connect with a team, inspire a team, build a team, hire, train, onboard people. What are the risks that person has from an online relationship versus one, or an online experience versus one that might be in person? It's a lot more challenging. And certainly also just as people, we've got the difference between being in an office environment and being in a remote one where we don't have those kind of casual interactions and so forth that we might otherwise. So a leader really has to, and all of us are leaders, we've all got to be able to bring a higher level of empathy, a higher level of interpersonal skills. We've got to challenge ourselves even more to make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to really connect with that person, to go that extra mile, if you will, because we're not in person, we are online, and the relationship is different. 85% of users in a recent survey had said that a thoughtful response to a bad review would improve their impression. In other words, the way that someone responds, the sensitivity, the empathy, the engagement, and so forth, that kind of skill, that kind of approach can improve how someone connects to that person. And I think about interpersonal skills in general. If we had a primer, so to speak, so what are some of the key things that we could do really to connect more effectively? One, always, is to become genuinely interested in other people. Take the time, whether it's a customer, a prospective customer, a team member, take the time to become genuinely interested in that person, to listen, to encourage them to talk about themselves. It's not just about, okay, here we are, let's get right into the meeting, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's just take a second and really remember that we're still people on both sides of these screens, and we need to have that empathy, that caring, that appreciation. Talk in terms of the other person's interest. It's not just about me and about what's interesting to me, but it is about what's important to you. What's important to you as a customer, as a person, as a prospective customer, as a team member? What is important to you? Do I understand? Have I taken the time to do that? Try honestly to see things from another person's point of view, especially today. We've got people who are really struggling. So many of us. People who are working, they're working out of their homes. They've got kids running around. They're worried about a loved one. They are working out of their living rooms. So really to see where people are coming from in the environment that they're in, or if it's a meeting or whatnot, what is the person's perspective, and can I really try to understand it, to seek really to understand? And then again, just because we're in a screen doesn't mean we don't want to dramatize our ideas. Sometimes we need to have more energy. We need to have a way to be able to be more demonstrative about what it is that we're doing. So building relationships in a virtual world, we're drawing upon those things that we know from our real world, so to speak. And now let's just think about it. There are only 4 ways that we have contact with the world. And we're going to talk about each of these in a virtual world perspective, so to speak. So what do? How we look, what we say, and how we say it. Let's start with what we do. And we're talking about a virtual environment right now. How often have you gotten into a Zoom meeting? It's supposed to start at 11 o'clock in the morning. You're in, people are kind of strolling in. Could be a salesperson, could be a team member, whatever. The part of what we are demonstrating to people, and part of that credibility and that trust, is how are we presenting ourselves? Personally, I always try to get to a Zoom meeting, if I can, at least 5 minutes early, just so I'm there and I'm ready. And what message does that send to the person that I'm meeting with, or that we're meeting with? What it sends is, you're important. Your time is important. I value you. Being prepared. Sometimes we'll share something on a screen. And have we run it before? Are we having technology problems? But taking the time in advance to practice and make sure something works, especially if I'm presenting, especially if I've got a group of people there who are waiting for me, and I'm like, oh, geez, it's like, well, wait a second. Why didn't you just test your PowerPoint in advance? Why didn't you test a share screen in advance? I remember many times if I had an interview or an important meeting, I might even drive to that location in advance, understand where it was, understand how long it was going to take to get there. The same thing is true if I've got a presentation or a meeting. To come prepared is critically important. Giving appreciation, clearly we've talked about that. And then, of course, going the extra mile, doing that thing you can do to really connect with people to help them understand. I think about how we look. All of us, if we're going to meeting with people, we're sensitive in person to how we look. We're sensitive to the environment that we're in, to the how people are going to perceive us. And the same thing is true in an online world. Really to take the time to think about how am I being perceived? How am I looking? How are my presentations, my screen shots looking, and those types of things, my slides? Are we thinking about? This is one where this is a person who's giving a presentation or an interview on BBC, and taking the time to straighten out the things around me, taking the time to make sure that I have proper lighting and so forth. And so that when people are seeing me, they're seeing my best self, because all those things go to credibility in a virtual world, just as they would in a real world. But taking a time to think about asking someone, I will often ask someone, how does this look? Does the lighting look good? Does the sound look good? I just invested in a external microphone just because people were saying, your microphone is sound a little far away. Those are small things we could do that go to how we sound, but really let's be thinking about how we look. And there are cues, there are visual cues that we can keep in mind when we're communicating. Are we looking at the camera? Are we looking someplace else? When we're sitting down, especially at a desk, are we just sitting there? Are we leaning back? Or if I'm presenting, I'm leaning forward. Do I have intensity? Do I have that eagerness of just that wanting to connect and wanting to share something that I'm excited about? Facial expressions. Have you been in a meeting with someone where they're presenting and it's just like this, the face is like this, the energy like this? No, we can, just like we're in an in-person meeting, we even need to bring it higher. We talk about having a 20% higher energy level in an online environment. And we think also about what are the distractions that people have when they're virtual? Do I have my cell phone with me? Do I have different things? Can I be checking my email while you're on the screen? We've really got to work to keep people engaged. And part of that is how we look, how we can communicate, how we stay connected to people. If we're in a face-to-face meeting, a lot of times people wouldn't do something. They're not going to stop in the meeting and start checking email while you're sitting right there. But do they do that in an online? Of course, we all do it sometimes. So using gestures, using body movement, using energy, all these things will keep people engaged so that we can present effectively and we can really give off that appearance, that credible appearance, build credibility and build trust. Then there's a substance of what it is we say. So is it just my opinion or is it research? This is research from Dale Carnegie from 14 countries across the world, or whatever it might be. This is McKinsey research. It's always valuable to have something external to point to, but what is the evidence that I might be able to support to? Whether it's data, whether it's an exhibit, whether it's something, but what are the things that I can point to help support what it is I'm saying so I can communicate and connect more effectively to the people with whom I'm talking? Asking relevant questions. How many times have any of us, been in a meeting where someone's going on and on and on? Is it easier or is it harder to just talk and go on in an online? Sometimes it could be easier. We just go on, but stop. Remember, we're talking to people here, and are we asking questions? Are we asking thoughtful questions? Are we asking questions that demonstrate that I thought about this meeting or this interaction before I got there? Or did I just have breakfast, run downstairs, and here I am? All of this goes to credibility. All of it goes to trust and relationship. And again, conciseness. There's the old adage about, I would have written you a short letter, but I didn't have time, right? It's easier sometimes to just put something out there, but taking the time to be concise, to be thoughtful, to be intentional, critically important. And then, of course, there's the how we say it, the language, the way that we talk, the presentation skills. I mean, there are courses that we can take on online presenting, and there are things that we can do. There are books that we read, there's videos. How do we invest in ourselves to make sure that we are presenting and coming off in a polished way? Remember, this is something I would think that we're going to be in an online world, so to speak, not just through COVID. I mean, do we think that we're going to be going back exactly to the way things were before? We're always going to be face-to-face, or will there be a lot more meetings that will be online? As professionals, it is our, not just opportunity, it's our responsibility to invest in ourselves and make sure that we're giving ourselves the competitive advantage so that we can communicate effectively. How we say it is just absolutely critical. So really, we've got those four different ways that we can communicate that the world perceives us. We can work on all four of those. So how do we then, if we're to boil everything down, how do we build those trusted relationships in an online environment? The first thing, again, is about that resilience. It really is about, I can't give what I don't have. I mean, I can try to appear confident, but if I'm scared and nervous and I'm asking you to believe in me, will you? Or will you sense that? We are very intuitive. Even online, we can see things. We have to think back to the reasons that we have to be confident, the reasons that we have to believe in ourselves. Dale Carnegie believed, and certainly I believe, and our company believes, that every single person has inherent greatness. Let's dig deep and draw upon that so that we can be our best selves when we're communicating with people. Enhancing our interpersonal skills, right? So taking the time to think about, how do I interact with people in a more effective way? How do I build those trusting relationships, even though I'm not necessarily right in front of you? Being mindful how we look, what we do, what we say, and how we say it. All of these things, any one of us can become online ninjas, if you will, in terms of our presentation, our communication, our ability to build relationships. One of the things I think about a lot is how I felt in March, when all of the countries around the world were going into lockdown, when all of a sudden I and my entire company were all required to work from home. There was so much that was happening. There was so much uncertainty. I remember the economy, and people were getting sick, and the COVID numbers were going up. It was a very, very scary time. And at the same time, I remember one day in particular, sitting in my home office, thinking to myself, I should really be scared about this. I'm leading a global company. What's going to happen here? And I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't is simply because I thought, we've got to look at things, and I've got to look at things from the proper perspective. I remember 9/11 and leading a small company, and I was scared to death that that company was going to fail. And thank goodness we made it through that. And I remember thinking about 2008 and 2009. What a horrible time that was economically, and yet making it through that. And all of us can think back to times in our lives. And I encourage you, think about a time in your life that was a horribly challenging time. And then think about how you got through that. And that's what I was doing in that moment, thinking about with perspective. When we look back at these days, we're going to get through these days. We definitely will. The question is, what will we want to see about how we responded and how we handled ourselves? If it's a month or 5 months or 6 months or 5 years from now, and we look back at this time, do we want to see courage? Do we want to see resilience? Or do we want to see cowardice? Do we want to see some of this clinging to what things were? This is the opportunity for all of us right now to invest in ourselves, to recognize that the world that we're in right now is going to continue to change. How do we thrive in it? That's the opportunity for all of us to embrace that mindset, to recognize that we have got what it takes to survive, to be awesome, and really to develop a great competitive advantage. We're going to get through this, not just to go through it. We're going to grow through it. It starts with mindset. And I would encourage you to embrace that mindset and truly be the person that you are capable of being. And I thank you for being with me today.